We're going to begin chapter 27, and we're going to introduce your first participle form, the present or continuous participle. And in order to refresh your memory so that you'll be conversant with the third declension forms again, because some of you might have forgotten, I wanted to suggest that you review the 3-1-3 adjective pas, pasa, pan. Please review the 3-1-3 adjective where for the masculine endings, they use third declension nouns. The neuter endings, it uses third declension nouns. But the feminine endings, it uses a first declension noun with a different stem. And what we'll find is that the present continuous participle looks very similar to pas, pasa, pan. Now that you had a chance to review, let's go over the forms for the present continuous active participle. So these are the active forms. And the way we do it, the formula is you take the present stem, and so if we use our paradigmatic verb luo, we know that the present stem is you drop the omega, and so in this case it's lu. So we take lu plus the connecting vowel. That's the verbal part. And then we use the tense formative nu tau. This tells us that this is a participle. And then we use the 3-1-3 endings for the nouns, and that will give you the form. You have 24 forms, possible forms for the participle, in the same way that you have in any 3-1-3 adjective or 2-1-2 adjective, you would have 24 forms of the adjective. And so to review the third declension nouns, remember that the endings are sigma, os, e, alpha, s, on, c or sin, and os. So those are the endings. Now, the nominative singular is the one form that's for the masculine that's not going to look like what we expect. It's going to be different. And so, like the third declension nouns, when you memorize the participles, you always have to know the genitive singular form, because like the declension nouns, you'll see the stem of the verb in the genitive singular. So for the nominative singular masculine form, you take the stem lu, and it uses the connecting vowel omicron, and then it uses the nu tau, and then you're supposed to add a sigma to it. But actually, what happens is that just for the nominative singular form, it doesn't do that. Rather, it doesn't use the sigma, and instead it just drops the tau. And when it drops the tau, this omega wants to go long. This omicron, wants to go long. And so the form for the nominative singular is lu-on. And that's the only really unusual form. And so everything else will be very predictable. So let's go over the genitive stem. You take the present lu, your present tense stem. You add the connecting vowel, which is omicron. You add the tense formative, which is nu tau. And because it's a genitive singular, you add os to it. So luontos. So the nominative singular form is luon. And then the genitive singular form is luontos. Well, let's do the dative. Take the stem lu, take the connecting vowel omicron, take the nu tau, which is the tense formative for the participle, and instead of os, since we're doing the dative, you add e. And so luonti is the dative singular masculine form of the present continuous active participle. And then if I want to do the accusative form, it's going to be luont, and then you add the alpha, luonta. For the nominative plural form, it's lu-on. And what's nominative plural form for the third declension? It's s, luontes. The genitive plural is lu-on-tone. And the dative plural is lu-ont. But we're adding c or sin. And when the tau and the sigma combine, it will become a sigma. This will want to, its internal vowel will want to change. And so what happens is the new gives new drops. This goes long because of the drop. And the final form will be lu, u, si, or sin. And then the accusative will be lu, ant, tas. So those are the forms. So let's say these forms together. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Luon, luantas, luanti, luanta, luantes, luanton, luusi, or sin, luantas. Now, the neuter plurals are going to look very similar to the masculine forms, but remember they use different case endings. So for the neuters, the third declension case endings are nothing, os, e, nothing, alpha, own, si or sin, and alpha. And so when we form the nominative singular neuter form, we have lu plus the connecting vowel plus the tense formative neutal that tells you it's a participle, and you're adding to it nothing. Nothing. You're adding to it nothing. What happens when you do that? Well, the tal drops, and in order to distinguish the nominative singular neuter, make sure that we know that it's different from the masculine form. The omicron actually stays short, and so if I were to clean this up, the final form is luon. And again, the nominative singular is for third declension forms, whether they're participle or a noun, is always the irregular form. You really need to know what the genitive form is to see the stem for the entire paradigm. And so let's go over the genitive stem then. So you take the present tense stem, the connecting vowel, the tense formative, nuta, and then you add to it os, luantas. And that's and notice as like with the 313 adjectives, the genitive singular forms for the neuter and masculines are exactly the same. And it'll be the same thing with the dative singulars as well. So if I were to do the dative singular neuter for luo, it'd be lu on t, because that's the case ending. And the neuter singular and accusative forms are the same. So the accusative singular is luon. The plural form uses the alpha ending, so it's luanta for the nominative plurals. For the genitive plural, it uses own, so it's luonton. Same thing that we learned here for the dative plural. You add a c to it, so the final form for the dative plural is lu, u, si, or sin. And lastly, luanta. Because the neuter forms for the nominative and the accusative forms are the same. So ready? 1, 2, 3. Luon, luantas, luanti, luon. Luanta, luanton, luusi or sin, luanta. Now, you probably noticed that, wait a minute, didn't I see luusi before luisi? Doesn't that look like they are loosing, the present active indicative, a third person plural, they are loosing? It does. It looks exactly the same. The difference here is that this forms a dative participle, and so it would be translated to the ones who are loosing. Context will tell you whether it's a participle in the dative plural or whether it's the third person present active indicative for luo. So context will tell you because they're spelled exactly the same. Now let's go over the feminine forms, and I'll use a different color ink. Notice that that the feminine forms use the first declension ending. So let's go, and then the stem is going to be, so here's this lu, the connecting vowel is u, and it's this sigma plus the connecting vowel u that's going to tell you that this is a participle. And so whatever the first declension feminine form endings are, you want the endings that attach to a stem that ends with a sigma. So that would be alpha, So remember doxa? Doxa is doxa for glory. That's going to be a good example of the first person declension nouns. Or again, pasa, because pasa ends with, has a sigma there for the 313 adjective. So let's remember pasa. So pasa, it's pasa, pases, passe iota subscript, pasan, pasai, pason, pasais, pasas. Those are the endings. So you attach this stem to it. So it's luuses, luuse iota subscript, san. That's the accusative singular. The plural nominative for the feminine form is luusai, luuson, luusais, and luusas. These are the feminine forms. It uses the first declension endings. Doxa or pasa is a good example. Remember that in the genitive and dative singulars, it switches to the eta and it goes back to the alpha. That's something you already learned. And so this is the entire paradigm for the present continuous active participle. What you need to remember is, here's the genitive singular. This is the stem. Remember what the stem looks like. The nominative, the masculine and neuter forms share the exact same stem. It's the feminine forms that use a different stem. But this stem, you attach to it the third declension noun endings that you already know, and that gives you the form for the masculine and neuter forms. And then for the feminine forms, you need to add the first declension ending, and remember what the feminine stem is, which is different, and that will get you the feminine forms.